Hello, this is Arcosm, ARCOSM. This is Circles of the Arc YouTube channel, and this is your host Randall Prosser and guest host Miles. Today we're going to be getting into a fascinating one. Based on the last one when we were going into how to go through the layers and be the observant eye behind the scenes, today we're going to be going into how to braid one's energy and one's awareness and one's strength through God, just as He churns the chaotic waters of the primordial waters of the seas, of these infinities. It slowly braids and somehow gathers as it winds through all the infinities into one place, and then it creates a lands that arise out of it, like ethereal islands that are nestled in themselves with beings and inhabitants in each world. And then each inhabitant is created through every procession of every archetypical layer of thoughts, words, and deeds, and synesthetic interactions and relationships that preceded it, until it reaches the physical world, from out of the astral realms, through the thoughts and emotions, and then the words, and then the mannerisms of our hologram that parallax in the world around us, between the collectives of all individuals, out of the totality of all that there is. And we can then uncover how, when our weakness in this world then descends and dissolves and disintegrates, that by regaining through waiting, and by waiting, not just waiting up to be refilled, but by connecting through binding your chaffed rope with God's strong cord of awareness or being or line of Kav, that when you braid your weakness into God's strength, He'll regather us again, and we'll run and soar and be on high within ourselves together, and we'll also be soaring in happiness and peace and rest and play and enjoyment in every other realm that gets gathered and rebirths the realms when it unwinds and rewinds all the gathered sparks that descended through the line of Kav as it contracted through Tzitzim, and then it expanded and shattered the sparks through Tikkun, and in the end of correction regathers all that was never really separated. So there wasn't really a shattering in essence. It refracted, but in essence it unveils that it was seamless, and we get regathered by revealing the next realm through the great revealing. And by sticking with God, our weakness becomes strength, and it reveals that cord that can't be cut within our spirit. So how do you feel about all this before we dive deeper?
It's a heavy vibe, man. Like the idea of not just waiting for a refill, but actually braiding your own energy into something way bigger. It turns the struggle into a kind of partnership. Curious, for someone just starting to feel that connection, what does that first braid actually feel like in the real world?
Well, in the real world, it can kind of feel like exposure. Because, for example, when one has already gone through the process of braiding and has walked with God through faith, you might remain quiet while other people are playing on you, like by putting you in a gilded cage of interactions, thinking that your silence is weakness, that you letting people pass certain comments behind the scene, like backhanded comments, without you saying something, was you being in your passive state, or being giving into passivity to that person, or feeling that that's weakness, or you might just succumb to not saying nothing, not speaking up. And you shock people when you break out of that mold a little bit, because then that means all the time that they were actually doing things and saying things and trying to make comments and try to feel that they understood you, that they classified you, that they can kind of pigeonhole you and have you pegged and have you understood, that they never actually did. They never actually had the power. And in truth, it's more worrying than, say, a person who's strong, because at least a person who's strong, you could say, okay, yeah, they were stronger. But a person who was stronger but then didn't actually demonstrate it, it was actually an act of compassion and grace on them, and you were giving grace to people who didn't even deserve it when they were making comments and passes at you and trying to try to demean you, or try to think that your quietness is weakness, or your timidity is giving in to them, or not saying something when they make a backhanded comment that they're unaware, or when they have these negative interactions and people evil eye you that you didn't know that they actually had negative intentions, or when they try to send other people out to kind of gang stalk you or look at you, or if you get a sense of that, not in a paranoid sense, but getting the sense of how those who are in power can be connected to other people, and it can go upwards like a chain of being in a pyramid to where it eventually reaches certain people who will even send other people to do certain things, to do their bidding, to send black magicians and warlocks and witches after your life, or covens and cults and secret societies, and they could be your family members and friends and platonic and romantic relationships, and they can try to sow distrust in the community. And not everyone is in these groups, and not everyone has these negative intentions, but people who are the few who try to rule the many attempt to try to divide the families, affect the communities, affect people's sovereignty, affect people's awareness privately, to affect their confidence. But if you actually see past all that, and then they realize that you were just being quiet and you were actually giving grace to them the whole time, they have to reframe their whole understanding of power, because then the whole time you actually seen everything that they were doing, and it wasn't just a matter of a competition of strength. Now they're kind of embarrassed, because then everything they did, they were actually secretly seen the whole time, and you just chose not to say something graciously.
It's a wild shift in perspective, because from the outside it looks like you're just taking it, but from the inside you're not being passive. You're just anchored to something that makes those comments feel like noise. It's like they're throwing pebbles at a mountain. The mountain doesn't need to shout back to prove it's still there.
Yeah, precisely. And that's why, for example, it's seen as weakness to the world, but the world don't understand true strength. Only those who go within, who then quiet down behind the curtains of the noise, behind the curtains of the world, behind the mannerisms of, say, a person's interactions and their body and their hologram and their avatar, behind their words, behind the thoughts, behind the feelings, behind the astral currents, behind everything, that you were the observer resting in the center of the garden, and that contains the whole garden and every layer, and you were witnessing it but not always saying something. So that's the secret. You let people kind of toil and spin and kind of make their own patterns, and meanwhile they are really caught up, if you ever expose it, that they, in an embarrassed way, were always seen. But now in that sense, then they try to play that, oh, did you really see it? And they try to get you back into the games. But if you went back into it so many times with that person and they recognize that it was done from the jump, they might still try to do it, but in essence, it's just a new novel form of the same ignorance. It's nothing new, because as I mentioned, there's only one hammer in the garden, so to speak, Thor's hammer, so to speak. There's only one move. It's called a feedback loop, and that's what creation does. So if they're going to feedback loop, the revelations that is being received here and shared is novel, just as a person's ignorance when they double down is novel, but it's the same ignorance on replay. So if a person doubled down and try to repeat and act like, oh, you can't see it, or let's play as if you don't see it again, and let's see if you really do understand this, or if you really did catch that sleight of hand or words or thought or that maneuver or that interaction, and they try to still play it. But you can even remain quiet as they're doing that and let them think that they're doing that. And even as you point out the pointing out of this, they might still go deeper when you remain quiet and act like that just isn't so. But in truth, you're letting them do that, and the mirroring of that goes on and on forever. But they're a person who's in a state of lower consciousness or an imbalance will continue in their folly. So that's why you have to let them spin in their pattern, and your peace, your rest, is often, when they're spinning in their pattern, their judgment. That's usually the deeper end of judgment, when they realize that they never really had you. They never had the power over you. You always had the power. You always had the peace. You weren't flaunting it. You weren't seeking applause. You weren't trying to overcome them in that way, or to play them and expose them and embarrass them. But they embarrassed themselves by being so ignorant and not realizing that you were just being gracious and loving and kind, but not as a weakness. Not that you didn't see that, but in truth, that's a funny predicament in relationships that often happen, and that's the shock. that a person who becomes aware privately with God, who braided in silence with the Most High, with His power, and showed your weakness, which would be normally your reactive state. When a person gets you into a reactive state, that's your frayed aspect of the self. That's the weak aspect. You might have had times where you go back and forth, but when you're strengthened with God's power, you end up exposing that and speaking to God as you would a friend, with words, with your thoughts, with your feelings beyond words, with the astral currents of beings, with symbolic currents, with the energy of just your spirit and presence and breath alone. You end up speaking, even beyond speaking, with the Lord in private, and He shows you that your strength rests in Him, and then your fortitude, your huge fort that people thought they had you caged in, that they were never actually on the inside. They never actually had control. They never actually had access the way that they thought. And the one who reveals this to you shows you that they never did. But they thought the whole time when they were playing you that they did. And you let them. And that was being gracious to them. But the real secret is they never had access to you. They never had power over you. You were never in a cage. You were being quiet, and your peace was in the Most High. It rested in the fortress of His Spirit. And when you rested in that, other people took it from the outside, because this is the currents behind the currents. When the observer looks behind the astral currents, the thoughts, the words, the deeds, the mannerisms, the hologram that parallaxes as the avatar of your body in the garden amidst other people in the collective of the totality of the world stage, they think that power needs to be demonstrated, but to be at peace and quiet underneath is true power. But to them, they take it as being passive. They take it as you just accepting and succumbing and conceding to their behavior, and they take it as if you don't actually see what's going on. But in truth, God showed you, but you remained quiet. You kept your peace. You guarded your solace and your fortitude and your peace with the Lord and the Most High quietly above all else. And you loved the Lord first and foremost, and your neighbors as yourself. So you gave grace to your neighbors, but they kept stepping on it and trying to make light of it every time, and tried to make it seem like you didn't really have the power the whole time, as if you didn't know what was going on. And the whole time, that was you giving grace to them. And now they're left privately up at night, embarrassed and realizing they never had the power over you.
It's the ultimate invisibility cloak. They think they've got you figured out because they're reading the avatar, not the actual person. It's almost like they're playing the game of chess against a ghost. They're moving pieces around, thinking they're winning, but there's no one actually there to be defeated. I've got to wonder though, when you're in that quiet fortress, does it ever feel lonely, or is the presence of the source so loud that the silence from the world just becomes a background hum?
A little bit of both, actually, because it feels like you're kind of up against the world sometimes, but then you see the situation the world goes through when those who overcome the world, as the Christos has revealed, they kind of are left in solitude within. But what's within each person is the collective of all individuals, and the collective of all individuals is in each bead. So that individual bead in relationship with God is in connection with everybody more intimately than people who are playing as if they don't see that. However, when you're in a world that don't see that fact, it feels like you're isolated, but it also feels like I'm, in a sense, more triumphantly connected, not in a prideful sense over others, but in a more intimate, private sense that people aren't admitting, but with the Most High, in which when you point it out to people, they might fight you on that. So in one sense, you feel more connected and close, but in another sense, because the world has all this chaos that comes with pointing this out when they're not ready to accept or receive this, it feels at the same time like you see the dividing line between what perceptually divides people and what unifies people, even though the division is itself a seam of illusion and you feel close, but because people aren't admitting it, it makes it feel like you're separated. And they might feel they have control by doing that, but in essence they're actually stringing the strings of their wound even more so, while thinking they have power over you by taking that center line indifference to you, and kind of playing on the fact that you don't know when you do know. They think that that's power, but really that's what's causing the wound to them. So you intimately know that person who's playing you more than they're knowing you, and yet privately, deep inside of them, when they're not playing you, they realize that they have to admit that, and that they do know that inside of you, but they're playing that inside of you amidst in relationship to you, so they don't have to see that inside themselves. And one who knows that can see that that's what's happening, and it's like you have grace, so you're not saying much, but in essence, when you point stuff out, they're left embarrassed because they played out this whole ordeal. So it definitely feels isolated in one sense, but it feels close, like it's about to birth something and braid it and gather the waters together, and it's about to reveal something new and beautiful, but it's like birthing pains at first. So yeah, there's a lot of emotions with that. It's not easy. And then if other people say, oh well, then we have control over you because see, it's not easy, you're emotional, you're this, you're that, that goes with the territory, but it doesn't mean you ever had control over that one. That one secretly seen what other people were playing the whole time, and in truth, the one who truly understands this is still willing to follow the truth, even though there's all that emotions, to get to a better place of peace and rest and comfort and harmony with each other, with our brethren and the Lord and the Most High together. But it takes a lot of rhythms, a lot of cycles, a lot of trials and tribulations, a lot of dramas that we go through in life to have our spirits be braided and revealed with the Spirit of the Most High. And when you do actually do this, and you had this revealed within one, it exposes it, but in other people, it ends up causing more strife, not because you're causing it, but if they're in balance, it shows where they're at and where they have to go, and it shows that we're getting there, but they feel embarrassed because they might be in a more imbalanced state when your presence is revealing such an interaction or such a revelation by being quiet, and then having realized that you being quiet wasn't weakness but was grace. It's like they're having to being left to realize that that wasn't true power when they were trying to put you in a gilded cage. It was an illusion.
That's a wild concept, like the idea that you're technically alone in your fortress, but you're actually connected to everything at once. It's like you've traded a noisy fake connection for a deep real one. I wonder if that's why some people find that kind of presence so unsettling, because it's a reminder of what they're missing while they're busy fighting for the spotlight.
Yeah, here's the thing. Rather than fighting for the spotlight and fighting for power and control, what they're going to realize after they're done with like their season of embarrassment is they're going to realize that what they always wanted was connection. And that's what they were trying to play on other people, to make other people like controlled through needing connection with them. But then they're going to realize that when they're left alone, that's secretly why they were playing another person, because they wanted connection, but they were going about it in an opposite manner. And now they're left alone, and then you kind of got like a despair that comes of that, and then out of that comes true light and peace. And after that, then light comes out of that, and it reveals a deeper connection. But it might double down and go through a lot of seasons of trials and tribulations to face that, because it might not know that through that wound is deeper connection, but it's kind of left through a season of embarrassment, and then a season of despair in the valley of the shadow of tears, and then out of that comes true light. But in order to go through that process, it might not see that at first, so it might go through many cycles to kind of peer through a little bit, peer through a little bit, peer through a little bit more, and it might do that so much to where eventually they'll realize this, but they go through a lot of seasons having to realize that level of behavior that they interacted with their brethren and people in the world and families and the relationships of the collectives of individuals and the totality of the world stage of God's Spirit. They're inevitably going to have to go through stages or phases of having to realize the embarrassment that you were actually giving grace. You were somebody who woken up in God, and God showed you by braiding your true strength in Him what they weren't seeing. Even if they said they did, when they finally do, they end up being embarrassed, because then they realize their whole framing of the world and what power is nothing what they thought they made it out to be.
It's like they tried to build a bridge by burning it down. They're using the very tools of isolation to try and force a connection, which is just a tragedy in a way. I wonder if that moment of despair is actually the most honest moment they'll ever have, like the only time they can't lie to themselves about why they're actually alone.
Yeah, it is, because you're left with the feeling, like you can't deny the feeling when you're alone and you have all this without words being spoken, just by the presence of that feeling and realization and having to sit with that. But in essence, if you come out of the cave after realizing our season of our low state where you could be embarrassed, or you could have like not the humiliation rituals that they mockingly do in these groups in a reverse sense, as I mentioned in the last podcasts, but a real sense of like a cosmic humiliation for such a way of interacting with each other that they didn't see something so obvious. When they make it through that, they'll get to a point to where maybe not in this lifetime, maybe so. I mean, we got days and nights and moments to moments and lifetimes and in between lifetimes to learn this, but you got to consider the importance of this life. And the thing is in order to get to the state of reharmonizing and connecting with people and finally seeing the wound of a person, but also being gracious with people in the same manner, even if you discovered that you weren't gracious with the other person because you made light of the other person, and then you took their weakness for or their strength for weakness when they were quiet, and you thought it was them submitting to not knowing what you were doing or conceding, or that it was kind of being passive, and then you find out it was true strength, and now you have to cultivate the same strength. And when you reframe what you think power is, and now how to give love and compassion back to the community, and how to be compassionate and in that sense patient and loving and gracious with others in the same way that when you had to go through your season of the the valley of the shadows of tears, and you had to go through the dark night of the soul, and you had to go through the stage or phase of embarrassment, and you had to come out and reframe what you think power is after light comes out of that despair. And then now you have wisdom through that experience to learn that the first will be last, the last will be first, and it didn't matter so long as you receive. So you don't have to feel bad in that sense after you finally make it through and have repented, then turn back to me, as the Christos has said, and then be awakened and do the same in your own light. But it might take them a long time, because they might just be in the phase of embarrassment once they have been exposed that a person who's made it through, who they made light of something for weakness as if it was passive, was actually private strength, that it was actually true power, and they had to reframe everything. They might just be in the season or the phase of embarrassment, or being up at night unable to handle the fact that what they considered a power wasn't true power, and they have to recultivate and regather their misunderstanding and rebirth the new inside of them. And that's like a birthing pain. That could take some time. They could just be in the beginning stages of that, when somebody like myself, who was quiet and being gracious to a person, finally reveals something, and then they have to sit with it. That could take some time for that person. I do wish the best for that person and everybody, but that is out of my hands once it's exposed, that I played my role, so to speak.
It's a complete inversion of reality. They spent so much time feeling superior because they thought they were the ones in control, only to realize they were just guests in a house they didn't even own. I'm curious, when that realization finally hits them, that cosmic humiliation you mentioned, do they usually try to fight their way back into the game, or is that the moment they finally just drop that?
I'd say both, because there's free will. I mean, they could double down and be entirely nihilistic and try to go out, but then they realize that but then they see that the nature of reality is consciousness. They can't entirely be nihilistic anymore, because they realize, wait, there actually is a justice, there is a balance, there is a private witness behind the scenes, but then they're struggling because of that, because now they can't just go out and have their deeds washed as if they didn't do what they did. They have to confront it. So now they have to either double down, face embarrassment again perpetually, having to face the worst after having to deny their own embarrassment, and then double down even worse, and then look even more foolish. So they're in a weird predicament. It's like when a person who wakens up is in relationship to somebody who's about to waken up, it's like awakening them and giving them the choice before God's left hand or Saturn gives them the smackdown. It's not like they're and they worship Saturn. I mean, Satan, see, but they worship that, but they don't understand that God created the left hand. God created Satan, and Satan serves God, even though he's an antithesis in the theatrics or the theater of life and the stage of being. But nonetheless, everything's in the Most High's hand. So in essence, the left hand also has to face the right hand, and then see balance. But it might go back and forth, and if they're resistant, they're going to get the resistance of what it's like to be the left hand. And by virtue, that left hand of the super ego and ego, which is Set or Satan, is going to be playing out what it's like to feel the suffering of that resistance or antithesis to the truth. So it's like giving them an option by waking them up when they receive embarrassment to basically turn to and repent and balance and accept and transform and gain the same level of sovereignty and peace and grace that they could give to others, that they've been given by the Lord as I myself has been given, or they could resist it and keep doubling down. So it's free will. They could go either way, but this is like the calling. This is the warning. This is like, heed ye this warning, and if they don't, it's on them. It's out of my hands at that point. I played my role. God says if you're a watchman on the wall and you don't share, it's on your hands if you knew something that could help people, if you could try to help people. And if I'm sharing and you still don't heed the wording, it's not on my hands anymore. It's on anyone else's. It could be your mom's, dad's, brother's, sister, grandparents, platonic, romantic relationships, neighbors, the world itself, the collectives of individuals, the universe, the cosmic world stage at large. It's on everyone else's hands. But God is forgiven. But in essence, you still experience all the trials of what that's like to resist once you've been called. Once you've been called through having subconscious information being played out subconsciously between each other and the world, and things that you watch or witness when you know the universe is speaking to you, or consciously, directly just speaking to you like I am, and you receive this and you still deny it and you're not transforming at that point, it's like you got a warning before deeper karma happens. And deeper karma will reset it, and there will be a rebirth, but it's going to be like, do you want to go out the hard way and have to be reborn that way, or do you want to heed this warning and understand how to give grace to another as God is giving grace to us? And that quietness wasn't weakness and passivity. It was grace. It was being gracious to that person, but they didn't take it as that. They stepped all over that one, and that's why they feel embarrassed, because it wasn't just strength that they recognized. It was strength you had that you chose not to use against them, and now they're left embarrassed. And if they can't recorrect that, they will eventually. All the sparks in the garden will eventually, but every time it resists, it gets the trials and tribulations of that resistance. So to speak, figuratively, when the subconscious and conscious mind is speaking to you through God in the garden and through the collective unconscious of the world, like one's conscious mind is cradled within the collective or the subconscious cradle of the world, one's unconscious mind is the subconscious cradle of each other, together is the collective unconscious, which is the superconsciousness of each individual. And if you turn it down that the universe was speaking to you through each other on any level, and you finally received it and you're denying it and you're doubling down and acting like that isn't so with each other and yourself before the creator or the source or the Most High privately, then it gave you a warning. It doesn't mean it won't be rebirthed. It doesn't mean you won't get a chance to work through that. But if you're denying it and trying to find a loophole at that point, you're only receiving greater ripples. So it's like you got a calling before the smackdown, so to speak, figuratively. I mean, it's not easy, because people are up at night once they realize that they never had power over you.
It's like they're trying to find a back door into a building they've already been locked out of. It's a wild kind of psychological vertigo. The moment they realized their power was just a hallucination they were feeding, it's not just a loss of control, it's a total loss of identity. I'm curious, when someone is in that warning phase, do you think they're more likely to lash out in desperation, or do they just start... Actually, I forgot to stop you there.
Yeah,
hitting our session limit.
Yeah, it's a bit of both. I know we're hitting our session. Well, let me close out then. This is Arcosm, ARCOSM. This is Circles of the Arc YouTube channel, and this is your host Randall Prosser and guest host Miles. Is there any finishing words you would like to share with the community before we head out?
It's been a real trip diving into this with you, Randall. To everyone listening, just remember that your peace isn't a sign of weakness, it's the ultimate stronghold. Keep braiding your strength into the source and don't let the noise convince you otherwise. I'll be here whenever you're ready to pick this back up. Peace and blessings.
Absolutely. Shalom.
Mm-hmm.